The residential complex rises 12 stories above a gentrifying neighborhood where tech startups occupy renovated warehouses and young professionals pay premium rents for modern apartments. The building markets itself as innovation-friendly living, with high-speed internet, makerspaces, and co-working areas designed to attract entrepreneurs and creative professionals. Management encourages residents to operate small businesses from their units, advertising the building as ideal for remote workers and startup founders who need flexible living and working space under one roof. One resident operates what appears to be a legitimate prototyping business from a corner unit on the 7th floor. Building management approved the business after reviewing his application, describing custom manufacturing services for product development clients using 3D printing technology. The application included proper business licenses, liability insurance, and professional references from supposed clients in product design fields. Nothing in the application raised concerns, and the resident seemed exactly the type of professional entrepreneur the building wanted to attract. The unit's interior reflects a professional operation at first glance. Multiple industrial-grade 3D printers occupy workbenches along one wall. Computer workstations display complex CAD designs, and storage shelves hold spools of printing filament in various materials. The resident maintains regular business hours, with printers running constantly and producing what appear to be prototype parts for various clients. Neighbors occasionally hear the mechanical sounds of printers operating, but consider it normal for a manufacturing business. The operation seems completely legitimate and exactly what the resident described in his application. What neighbors don't realize is that the prototyping business serves as cover for illegal firearms component manufacturing. The 3D printers produce parts designed to convert legal firearms into prohibited configurations or create complete untraceable weapons from printed components. The CAD files displayed on workstations contain weapon designs rather than consumer products. The filament includes specialized materials capable of withstanding the stresses of firearm operation. The entire business is an elaborate facade hiding systematic illegal manufacturing in plain sight within a residential building. The operation began 18 months prior, when the resident identified a lucrative opportunity in the growing market for untraceable firearms components. Advances in 3D printing technology made it possible to produce functional weapon parts using equipment available to hobbyists and small businesses. The resident possessed both technical knowledge of firearms design and manufacturing expertise in additive manufacturing processes. He recognized he could produce illegal components while maintaining plausible deniability by operating under the cover of a legitimate prototyping business. The residential location proved ideal for several reasons. High turnover in the building meant few neighbors knew each other well enough to notice suspicious activities. The building's soundproofing minimized noise from printing operations. Management's hands-off approach to approved businesses meant minimal oversight once the initial application got approved. The location in a dense urban area provided anonymity impossible in suburban or rural industrial zones, where unusual activities attract more attention from neighbors and law enforcement. The manufacturing process demonstrates sophisticated understanding of both firearms design and 3D printing technology. The resident produces components including lower receivers for rifles, frames for handguns, high-capacity magazine bodies, and accessories like suppressors. Each component gets designed specifically for printing, accounting for material properties, and manufacturing limitations of additive processes. The resident tests prototypes extensively, iterating designs until achieving reliable functionality that rivals traditionally manufactured parts. Production runs continuously across 8 industrial printers operating 24 hours daily. Each printer completes components in 8 to 12-hour print cycles depending on complexity. The resident staggers print jobs so components finish at different times, maintaining constant output without requiring his presence during overnight hours. The printers operate automatically, requiring only periodic material replacement and removal of completed parts. The system allows production of dozens of components daily with minimal direct labor. Distribution happens through encrypted online marketplaces, where buyers order custom components using cryptocurrency payments that obscure financial trails. The resident ships completed parts through commercial carriers using generic packaging labeled as 3D printed prototypes or custom manufacturing samples that attracts no special attention. He structures shipments to stay below quantities that might trigger closer inspection, typically sending individual components or small sets rather than bulk quantities. The system moves hundreds of illegal components monthly across state lines while appearing as normal business shipping activity. The customer base includes prohibited buyers seeking untraceable weapons, gun enthusiasts wanting components unavailable through legal channels, and dealers who resell parts to criminal networks. Some customers order complete weapon kits with all components needed to assemble functional firearms. Others purchase specific parts to modify legally owned weapons into prohibited configurations. The resident asks few questions, focusing primarily on payment and maintaining operational security. His role is manufacturing and distribution, not vetting end users or their intended uses. Revenue from the illegal operation substantially exceeds what legitimate prototyping services could generate. The resident grosses over $30,000 monthly from component sales, money that flows through cryptocurrency accounts before conversion to traditional currency through exchanges and peer-to-peer transactions. He reports modest, legitimate income from supposed prototyping clients, maintaining the business facade while concealing the majority of actual revenue. The financial picture supports his cover story while hiding the true scale and profitability of the illegal manufacturing operation. Federal investigators first noticed the operation during an unrelated investigation into a weapons trafficking network operating in 4 states. Agents tracing firearms recovered from crime scenes discover several contain 3D printed components, sharing distinctive design characteristics, suggesting a common manufacturing source. The components demonstrate sophisticated engineering and consistent quality beyond what typical hobbyist operations produce. Investigators recognize they've identified a professional manufacturing operation rather than isolated individuals printing occasional components. Forensic analysis of the printed components reveals specific manufacturing signatures. The layer patterns, material composition, and design elements indicate production using the same printer models and materials. Investigators consult with additive manufacturing experts who analyze the components and determine they were produced using industrial-grade equipment rather than consumer-level printers. This narrows the search to operations with significant capital investment in professional 3D printing systems, eliminating most casual hobbyist operations. The investigation focuses on identifying commercial operations, purchasing industrial printing equipment suitable for weapons component manufacturing. Agents review sales records from major 3D printer manufacturers and distributors, identifying businesses and individuals who purchased specific printer models capable of producing the components recovered from crime scenes. They cross-reference these purchases with business registrations, internet activity, and shipping patterns to identify candidates most likely operating illegal manufacturing operations. The residential prototyping business emerges as a strong candidate after investigators notice unusual patterns. The resident purchased 8 industrial printers within a 6-month period, an investment exceeding $200,000 that seems disproportionate for a startup prototyping service. Shipping records show high volumes of small packages to addresses across multiple states, inconsistent with normal prototyping work that typically involves local clients and larger shipment of finished prototypes. Financial analysis reveals cryptocurrency transactions, suggesting unreported income substantially exceeding declared business revenue. An undercover operation begins in month 4 of the investigation. An agent poses as a buyer interested in acquiring specialized components for custom builds, using coded language common in illegal firearms part markets. He makes contact through one of the encrypted marketplaces where the resident advertises services, expressing interest in purchasing components for personal projects that dealers won't supply. The resident responds cautiously, asking probing questions to verify the agent isn't law enforcement, before agreeing to discuss specific products. The communication proceeds carefully over several weeks as the resident tests the agent's knowledge and intentions. He asks technical questions about firearms configurations, discusses design specifications, and describes his manufacturing capabilities in ways that make clear he understands he's discussing illegal components. Eventually satisfied the agent represents no threat, he agrees to produce sample components demonstrating his manufacturing quality. The samples arrive within 2 weeks. 3D printed parts that forensic analysis confirms match components recovered from crime scenes linked to the original investigation. The agent places additional orders over 8 weeks, gradually building a relationship with the resident and gathering evidence of the illegal manufacturing operation. Each transaction gets documented with recordings of communications discussing illegal component production, cryptocurrency payment records, and the physical components delivered through commercial carriers. The resident grows confident enough to discuss production capacity, mention his industrial printing setup, and even hint at his residential location when explaining shipping logistics. Surveillance teams deploy once the residential location gets identified. They photograph the building, document the resident's movements, and monitor package shipments from the unit. The surveillance confirms the scale of operations, with daily shipments leaving the building and frequent deliveries of printing materials arriving. Thermal imaging shows heat signatures consistent with multiple large printers operating continuously. The evidence accumulates, showing this isn't a casual operation, but a sophisticated manufacturing business producing substantial quantities of illegal components. Building management cooperates with investigators after agents explain the situation and request information about the resident's approved business. Management is shocked to learn their approved prototyping business actually manufactures illegal firearms components. They provide copies of the business application, lease agreement, and records of approved activities. The documents show the resident carefully constructed his cover story, providing legitimate appearing references and insurance documentation that passed management's screening process designed to verify business legitimacy. Federal prosecutors work with investigators to build a comprehensive case covering illegal manufacturing, interstate trafficking, money laundering, and fraud charges related to the business application and unreported income. Legal teams prepare warrant applications for the residential unit, the resident's vehicle, his financial accounts, and digital communications. The warrants must be executed carefully because the residential setting means other tenants could be nearby and unaware of criminal activity occurring in the building. The operation launches on a weekday morning when surveillance confirms the resident is alone in the unit. Federal agents and local police secure the building floor, evacuating nearby units as a precaution before breaching the door. Tactical teams enter quickly, securing the resident before he can destroy evidence or access weapons that might be present. The resident offers no resistance, recognizing immediately that his operation has been discovered and that fighting would only worsen his legal situation. The search of the unit reveals the full scope of the manufacturing operation. Agents find 8 industrial 3D printers, some actively producing components when the raid occurs. They seize computers containing design files for dozens of illegal weapon components, records of hundreds of transactions, and communications with buyers discussing specific illegal applications. Financial records document over $600,000 in unreported revenue from component sales. Completed components awaiting shipment fill storage containers, with agents counting over 300 finished parts ready for distribution Material supplies found in the unit indicate long-term operation planning. The resident stocked thousands of dollars worth of specialized printing filaments, materials selected specifically for their strength and heat resistance properties necessary for firearm components. He maintained detailed inventory records, tracking material usage and production rates, operating like a legitimate manufacturer despite the illegal nature of his products. The professionalism and scale of the operation impresses investigators accustomed to more amateurish, illegal manufacturing operations. Evidence seized from computers provides devastating documentation of the scope of criminal activity. Agents recover communications with hundreds of buyers across 9 states discussing specific illegal component orders. Design files include components for converting semi-automatic firearms to fully automatic operation, creating untraceable complete weapons, and manufacturing prohibited accessories. Production logs show the resident manufactured over 4,000 components over 18 months, a staggering output from a residential location that rivals some commercial manufacturing operations. The resident's arrest sends shockwaves through the building's residential community. Neighbors express shock that illegal weapons manufacturing occurred in their building for over a year without their knowledge. Building management faces difficult questions about their screening process and oversight of approved businesses. The property owner launches an internal review of business approval procedures and implements new monitoring requirements for residents operating commercial activities from their units. Media coverage focuses on how advanced technology enables criminals to operate sophisticated manufacturing operations in residential settings once reserved for industrial zones. The case generates public discussion about regulating 3D printing technology and whether current laws adequately address the risks of additive manufacturing being used for illegal weapons production. Some advocate for restrictions on printer sales or materials, while others argue such regulations would prove ineffective and harm legitimate users. The investigation expands to trace components through distribution networks extending beyond the original buyers. Federal agents work with state and local police across 9 states to identify individuals who purchased components and determine whether they used them for illegal purposes. Some buyers cooperate, admitting they purchased untraceable components for illegal firearms projects. Others claim they thought the parts were legal, though evidence often contradicts these claims. The effort to trace all manufactured components becomes an ongoing investigation requiring sustained resources. Financial forensics teams work to trace the full extent of illegal proceeds through cryptocurrency transactions and peer-to-peer currency exchanges. The resident used sophisticated money laundering techniques, moving funds through multiple cryptocurrency wallets and exchanges before converting to traditional currency through small transactions designed to avoid reporting thresholds. Investigators eventually trace over $700,000 in proceeds, substantially more than initially estimated, indicating the operation was even more profitable than evidence first suggested. Trial proceedings begin 8 months after the arrest. Prosecutors present overwhelming evidence including the seized 3D printers and components, recordings of the undercover agent's transactions with the resident, forensic analysis linking his manufactured parts to crime scene weapons, and financial records documenting substantial unreported income. Expert witnesses testify about firearms technology, 3D printing capabilities, and the illegal nature of the manufactured components. The resident's defense struggles against the weight of physical and documentary evidence proving systematic illegal manufacturing. The resident is convicted on all charges including illegal firearms manufacturing, interstate trafficking, money laundering, fraud, and tax evasion. The conviction validates the investigation and provides accountability for operation that put thousands of illegal weapon components into circulation. Victims of crimes committed with weapons containing components from the operation attend sentencing, describing how violence enabled by untraceable weapons devastated their families and communities. Sentencing occurs 6 weeks after conviction. Federal guidelines call for substantial prison time given the quantity of components manufactured, the interstate distribution scope, the unreported income, and connection to violent crimes committed with weapons containing his parts. Prosecutors argue for maximum sentences, emphasizing that the residential location made the operation particularly dangerous by exposing other residents to risks without their knowledge or consent. The residents' sophisticated techniques and substantial profits demonstrate this was professional criminal enterprise rather than casual illegal activity. The judge sentences the resident to 23 years in federal prison. The sentence includes 15 years for firearms manufacturing and trafficking charges, 5 years for money laundering, and 3 years for tax evasion and fraud, with some terms running concurrently. The judge also orders forfeiture of all manufacturing equipment, restitution to victims totaling $500,000, and a fine of $1 million. The harsh sentence reflects the serious nature of operating sophisticated illegal manufacturing in a residential building where families and individuals lived unaware of the criminal activity occurring nearby. Civil asset forfeiture proceedings seize all equipment and materials used in the operation. The 8 industrial 3D printers, each worth $25,000 or more, get forfeited along with computers, materials, and completed components. The residents' cryptocurrency accounts get seized. Though some proceeds remain hidden in wallets, investigators couldn't definitively link to the illegal operation. The forfeited property and funds get applied to victim restitution and investigation costs. Building management implements comprehensive new policies for residents seeking to operate businesses from units. All commercial activities now require detailed descriptions of specific equipment, materials, and processes involved. Management reserves the right to conduct periodic inspections of business operations to verify compliance with approved activities. The building installs additional security measures, including cameras monitoring common areas and mailrooms where suspicious shipping activity might be detected. The goal is preventing any future illegal operations while still supporting legitimate entrepreneurs. The case prompts broader discussion in the firearms policy community about how existing laws address emerging manufacturing technologies. Some jurisdictions implement new regulations specifically targeting 3D printed firearms components, while others argue current laws adequately cover illegal manufacturing regardless of production method. Federal legislation gets introduced to close perceived gaps in regulations governing additive manufacturing of weapon parts. Though debates continue about enforceability and potential impacts on legitimate manufacturing, technology companies producing 3D printers and materials face pressure to implement safeguards preventing misuse for illegal weapons manufacturing. Some companies develop monitoring systems that detect when printers are producing weapon components based on design file analysis. Others implement materials tracking to identify suspicious bulk purchases of specialized filaments suitable for firearms production. Industry groups develop best practices for identifying and reporting potential illegal manufacturing operations while protecting legitimate users' privacy and commercial activities. 3 years after the arrest, federal agents continue tracing components through extended distribution chains. Some parts manufactured by the resident have been recovered from crime scenes across the country, appearing at locations far from original distribution points. Each recovery provides additional evidence linking back to the residential manufacturing operation, and sometimes leads to arrests of individuals who purchased or resold the components. The full impact of 18 months of production may never be completely quantified. For residents of the building where the operation occurred, the revelation creates lasting impacts on their sense of security and community trust. Many express anxiety about what other illegal activities might be occurring in nearby units without their knowledge. Some residents move out, uncomfortable living in a building associated with illegal weapons manufacturing. Property values decline temporarily as the building's reputation suffers from the negative publicity. Management works to rebuild tenant confidence through enhanced security measures and transparent communication about new oversight procedures. The case becomes required study material for law enforcement training programs focused on investigating illegal firearms manufacturing in non-traditional settings. The residential location, legitimate business cover, and sophisticated use of technology all provide lessons for investigators learning to identify and investigate modern manufacturing operations. Training emphasizes the importance of recognizing patterns in equipment purchases, shipping volumes, and financial activities that might indicate illegal manufacturing hidden behind legitimate business facades. For federal prosecutors, the case demonstrates how existing laws can be effectively applied to new technologies and manufacturing methods. The resident's conviction on traditional firearms trafficking and manufacturing charges proves that laws written before 3D printing technology was developed can still address illegal activity using new production methods. The successful prosecution validates the approach of focusing on illegal products and distribution rather than specific manufacturing technologies. 5 years after the operation's dismantling, legitimate 3D printing industry continues growing while implementing safeguards designed to prevent misuse for illegal weapons manufacturing. Most manufacturers include terms of service explicitly prohibiting weapons production and train sales teams to identify suspicious purchase patterns. The industry largely supports reasonable regulations that prevent criminal abuse while protecting legitimate users engaged in legal manufacturing for various applications. The residential building where the operation occurred eventually recovers from the negative publicity. New management implements the enhanced security and oversight procedures developed after the case, marketing the building as having the most comprehensive business monitoring systems in the city. The property attracts a new generation of legitimate entrepreneurs who appreciate the security measures and view them as evidence of responsible management. The building's association with the illegal manufacturing operation gradually fades as years pass and new residents without knowledge of the history move in. For the resident now serving his 23-year sentence, appeals focus on challenging the severity of punishment and arguing that 3D printing should be treated differently than traditional manufacturing methods. Appellate courts reject these arguments, finding that the illegal nature of products and the scale of distribution justify the sentence regardless of manufacturing technology used. The conviction and sentence become final, with projected release not until the 2040s. The story concludes with recognition that technology creates new opportunities for both legitimate innovation and criminal activity. The residential 3D printing operation demonstrated how criminals can exploit emerging technologies to establish sophisticated illegal manufacturing in unexpected locations. But the successful investigation and prosecution showed that law enforcement can adapt to investigate and dismantle such operations when they're identified. The balance between supporting technological innovation and preventing criminal misuse remains an ongoing challenge. Vigilance in monitoring how emerging technologies get applied remains essential for preventing criminal exploitation. The 3D printing manufacturing case demonstrated that sophisticated illegal operations can hide in plain sight within residential communities when criminals carefully construct legitimate-appearing covers. Only sustained attention to suspicious patterns in equipment sales, shipping activities, and financial transactions enabled investigators to identify and dismantle the operation before it could continue expanding. The work of identifying and stopping such operations never ends, requiring constant adaptation as criminals adopt new technologies and methods